Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Hello, and welcome to this month's Coffee with the Curator. My name is Rachael Holstege, and I'm the Associate Curator here at the Flint Institute of Arts. And I want to thank Bigby, as always, for sponsoring this series of lectures. And I also want to thank the Community Foundation of Greater Flint for now sponsoring the ASL interpretation that we have for our public programming. We have Tarek and Lexi here who are going to be helping throughout this, and it's a great addition to this program. We're very yes. All right, so a little preview at next month's Coffee with the Curator. I will be speaking again, and I'm going to be talking about some of the imperial Chinese robes that are in our permanent collection, including the 2 new ones that are on view in the galleries, if you have seen those. If not, go take a look at them in the Arts of Asia gallery. When you walk in, they flank both sides. So take a look at those, and then you can be ready for the lecture next month. And in addition to going to go see the Expressions exhibition that I'm going to be talking about, I want to encourage you to go see our newest Hodge Gallery exhibition, the Paul R. Jones Collection of American Art from the University of Alabama. If you haven't seen it, it's a great show, a great collection of African American art. And with that, we'll get started. So unfortunately, I don't have time, or we don't have time, to talk about every single artwork in this exhibition in depth. So instead, I'm going to focus on the Flint and Detroit artists that are in this exhibition, Expressions, works on paper by African American artists. That's in our graphics gallery exhibition right now. And before I start talking about the artists, I just want to preface by talking about the exhibition itself for a moment, and the curatorial process or thought as to why I made the selections that I did for this. So I started working on this exhibition probably over a year ago, maybe even 2 years ago. We do things very much in advance here. And I didn't really have a guiding idea of what I wanted to do for this exhibition. And because it's located in the graphics gallery, I started by queuing up all of our works on paper in our database, which is about 5,000 works, which is an overwhelming amount to sift through. So I tried to go about this kind of strategically by focusing on our more recent acquisitions to the permanent collection, and also works that have not been on view before. So all of the artworks in this exhibition, this is the first time that they have been on view in the museum. So I narrowed down my choices significantly with these sort of parameters, and I started to make connections between the things that I was seeing in these artworks. And then I also started thinking about the Paul R. Jones collection, which is focusing on African American art. And I thought, this might be a good way for the FIA to also show our African American art collection at the same time, kind of in conjunction with the Paul Jones. So I identified 14 works on paper from our permanent collection that are by African American artists and that had not been on view. And they were all acquired in the last 10 years by the museum. And to come up with sort of the theme of the exhibition, I felt that all the works that you see here, whether abstract or figurative, were incredibly expressive, either of the artists and their own personal experiences that they are conveying, or the artists conveying other people's experiences and historical moments. So here are just a couple of images of the exhibition. You have to go see it yourself in person to kind of get a better idea, including this Robert. I'm not going to talk about this today, but this Robert Pruitt drawing here is actually the tallest artwork that we've ever had in this gallery, so that's kind of a fun installation of that. So like I said, I'm going to be focusing on the Flint and Detroit artists in this talk, and the first artwork we'll be talking about is this print titled Mom in Harlem by G. Bowman. Bowman, who's on the right here, and then on the left here we have 2 images or artworks by Bowman that are not in our collection. I'm going to be doing this on all of the pages you see with the artist, so you just kind of get an idea of the other artworks they have, other than what you're seeing in the FIA's holdings. So Bowman was born and raised in Detroit, Michigan, and being an artist was not her first career. In 2008, she retired as the principal of the Detroit Academy of Arts and began in sciences, and then she began pursuing art full-time. Bowman's artworks center on exalting America's Black culture. She depicts scenes of Black men and women participating in family gatherings, trips to jazz clubs, and other rich cultural experiences. Her works reflect her family and her upbringing in Detroit's East Side community and Black Bottom neighborhood. This artwork is from a series by Bowman that centers around her mother, Minnie Matthews, as the subject, placing her in various places such as Detroit's Belle Isle, Seneca on the east side of Detroit, and Harlem, like you see in this work titled Mom in Harlem. The work is set in the interior of an apartment in Harlem, and Bowman's mother, Minnie, you can see she's actually reclined here on the bed, and then Bowman's aunts flank her around this. And this artwork was actually inspired by a photograph that Bowman had of her mother and her aunts in a very similar scene. So she really likes to connect her artwork to her personal experiences. And you can see she includes, this isn't that same photograph that this is based on, but she'll also include things like found images into her works. She also inserts her own artwork into her artwork, which is kind of interesting. So you see her mother is holding this flyer that says "Tonight Only." It's a flyer for a jazz show. And that is based off of a artwork by Bowman called Waiting for My Set 3. And she'll do this very frequently, is insert her own artworks into things like this. Bowman incorporates a variety of media in her collages, including photographs, handmade paper, and fabrics. Her artworks are reminiscent of artists such as Romare Bearden, which we see on the left here, who pioneered different collage techniques, giving him the title of the nation's foremost collagist. Like Bowman, his artworks focus on celebrating African American culture. She's also inspired by contemporary artist Kerry James Marshall, who's on the right here. His artwork is on the right there. Like Bowman and Bearden, Marshall's subject matter comes from his experiences as an African American and Black culture. He portrays his subjects in exaggerated, deep, dark pigments, something that you can also see that Bowman also does in her artwork. So you can really see those connections between Bowman's artwork and Bearden and Marshall, but also how she's sort of taking her own approach to this technique as well. So the next artwork we'll be talking about is by an artist who you might recognize his work or his name. He is Flint native Ed Watkins. In 2022, Watkins actually had an exhibition here at the FIA in the same gallery, the Graphics Gallery, titled Drawing from Life, Ed Watkins. And the artworks in this exhibition explored Watkins' experiences and responses to the social issues that he encountered as an African American man. The exhibition also looked at Watkins' role as an art instructor, which he did for over 40 years. Watkins, who's on the right here, and we have two of his other artworks on the left there. The one on the far left was actually included in the Drawing from Life exhibition. Watkins was born and raised in Flint, Michigan. He graduated from Flint Southwestern High School before attending college at Bowling Green in Ohio. And it was there he received a bachelor's and master's in education. In 1979, also at Bowling Green, he met his future wife, Marcia, and the two married before returning to Flint. Watkins spent his life not only creating art, but also teaching others how to create art. He was an instructor at Beecher High School, the Genesee Area Skills Center, and Mott Community College for a total over 40 years of art instruction. So this lithograph print comes from a series titled Surrender that focused on life's issues as a man of color from Watkins' perspective. For Watkins, the idea of surrender is a journey of letting go of what was, surrendering to the Holy Spirit, and committing to change. This work is based on a photograph that Watkins' son, Adam, took of his friend, Puck. And you can see here, the artist is really sort of trying to convey this moment of this person, you know, just having this deep emotional moment, and this idea that maybe this is the moment where they decided to surrender over themselves. Watkins has stated that he is inspired by the work of artist Charles White, who similarly created powerful images of African Americans chronicling their triumphs and struggles. This is actually an artwork by White that's in the FIA's permanent collection, and is from a series he did when he found a series of pre-Civil War slave advertisements, slave auction posters. and that advertised rewards for the capture of runaway slaves. So what he did is he appropriated this image and layered various images and phrases on them that reinforced the oppression that these individuals were facing. And not only is sort of that composition of that similar to Watkins, but you can both see this very strong emotion in both of them. This is a quote from Watkins regarding his work, which I felt was very fitting. Quote, "My personal artwork has always been inspired by the distinctive and spiritual nature of the African American experience. I hope to stir the viewer's spirit and their curiosity with my work by capturing this human experience in moments of reflection, celebration, healing, and despair. The ideas emerge from observed encounters, which are then developed into more interpretive, sometimes mysterious visual imagery on paper. I would like to think the complexity of the work is not the technique, but the ideas behind them." End quote. So the next artwork that we have is by Detroit-born artist Mario Moore. Born in 1987, Moore received a BFA in illustration from the College of Creative Studies in Detroit and an MFA in painting from Yale School of Art. His work focuses on the personal, social, and political implications of a segregated society. Through his artworks, he presents stories from his own life, those of his friends, his family, and in the case of the work that we're going to be looking at here, referencing history. So there's more on the right and two of his examples of his artworks on the left. So this illustration that we have in the gallery depicts Detroit abolitionist William Lambert. Lambert was born a free man in 1817 in New Jersey. And as a young man, he traveled with his Quaker schoolmaster, learning about the abolitionist movement. He eventually settled in Detroit, becoming a member of the historic Second Baptist Church and later St. Matthew's Protestant Episcopal Mission. Before the Civil War, Detroit was one of the busiest stations along the Underground Railroad, having seen over 40,000 African Americans pass through Detroit into Canada safely. After moving to Detroit, Lambert became associated with the Underground Railroad conductor, George de Baptiste, and the two would work together as conductors of the Underground Railroad, and also lobbied for the rights and freedoms of African Americans in Michigan. And so right here I have a map of the Underground Railroad, and you can see in yellow, I've highlighted those areas there, because that actually is a part of the artwork. In the background of the artwork, you see these lines here. That's actually embroidery with thread that was done by Mario Moore's mother, Sabrina Nelson. And you can see that it depicts these Detroit Underground Railroad paths that people would have crossed through that Lambert was associated with. The next artwork we'll be looking at is by another Detroit artist, Hubert Massey. And this is titled History of Detroit. Hubert Massey works in a variety of mediums, and most notably known for his large-scale murals, public murals that can be found throughout the state of Michigan. For example, here at the FIA, in our cafe and museum shop corridor, we have this mural titled Earth, Moon, Fire, and Water that was done by Massey over a decade ago. Massey was born in Flint, and after graduating from Beecher High School, he earned a Bachelor of Arts, same as me, from Grand Valley State University. Before graduation, he studied art at the prestigious University of London's Slade School of Fine Art. And it was there that he started learning the technique of fresco. And when he returned, he began studying the fresco technique with Stephen Dimitrioff and Lucien Bloch, who were apprentices to Diego Rivera. And if you've seen the murals in the Detroit Institute of Arts, you know that he has a very similar style and approach to his artwork that Massey does. Like I said, his public murals are located in places such as the FIA here, the Detroit Athletic Club, and there's also one at Grand Valley State University. There's many throughout the state, especially within the city of Detroit. So in addition to creating this line cut print that you see here, Massey used this image to create a 12-foot in diameter granite petrograph carving that is located in the IRS building in downtown Detroit. So he created this image for that, and then, it's such a great image that he then translated it into a print, which is fairly large, but definitely not 12 feet large. So in this work, Massey has recounted some key moments in the history of the city of Detroit. He set up the image like a wheel. You can see there in the center of the wheel, to pay homage to the city's auto industry. And so we're just going to go through and kind of look at the imagery that he's presented. It's not exactly chronological, he kind of has jumbled up these moments. But we're going to start here at about 9 o'clock with this man on that boat there. So 300 years ago, that is representing French explorer Antoine de la Mother Cadiz, who 300 years ago landed on the banks of the Detroit River and established a fort in 1701. In 1760, British rule took over the French rule, and in 1796, it became a first trading post. Detroit was known as the gateway to the West, as well as the Great Lakes. So as we continue counterclockwise, down here we see a reference to the Underground Railroad, which we just spoke about. We see a conductor here and some various people. Here we have the Ambassador Bridge, which was opened in 1929 and connects Detroit to Windsor, Canada. Up here we have the People Mover, which began operation in 1987. At the top here, near 12 o'clock, we have some references to migration to the north, as well as the auto industry with all of these cars. We also see references to Motown here. We have these men with this record behind them. As you all might know, Motown Records was founded by Barry Gordon and introduced the world to artists such as Marvin Gaye, Stevie Wonder, Diana Ross and Michael Jackson. Here we have the city's skyline with some buildings that you might recognize. And finally, Massey has incorporated all of these different individuals who you can see are from different cultures and backgrounds to just show the melting pot that is Detroit and all of the various people that live there. It's great work. There's many other things in this that I didn't identify, but you can go through and have a little quiz for yourself maybe. So our next artist is the creator of this print, Carol Harris, titled Uncharted Territory. This is a line cut print. So Harris is actually a fiber artist, and despite this being a work on paper that we just saw, on the left you can see this is one of her more fiber-based artworks. So Harris pushes the boundaries of traditional textile and quilting work by exploring new forms of stitchery, irregular shapes, textures, materials, and objects. A lifelong resident of Detroit, Harris received her Bachelor of Fine Arts from Wayne State University in 1966. She worked as an interior designer for over 45 years, and 33 of those she worked as the president of her interior and graphic design company that she founded herself. Her travels over her lifetime to Europe, China, and Japan and the Caribbean have influenced her artworks and process, leading her to explore how time impacts and alters our natural and constructed environments. So before we talk about the artwork, actually, I want to talk about the context and of which this was created. So Harris produced this work through a nonprofit called Signal Return. Signal Return is a Detroit nonprofit dedicated to preserving and teaching letterpress printing and building a community center for art, craft, and collaboration. In 2018, they started a series called On Press, Prints for Nonprofits. And this is when they invited a group of artists to each make a poster from hand-carved linoleum blocks, the sale of which from these prints would benefit a chosen service-based nonprofit in which the artist chooses. So the artist was paid an honorarium for their work, and then they selected the nonprofit that they wanted to support. Another great thing about this program is that many of the artists, like Carol Harris, have not worked in this medium before, so it's introducing these artists to a technique that they're unfamiliar with and can now explore further. So for this work, Harris chose the James and Grace Lee Boggs School in Detroit a K-8 school that opened in 2013 with the mission to nurture creative, critical thinkers who contribute to the well-being of their communities. In this work, Harris has created what looks like a map with dotted lines that cross through the image, as well as these circular spots that you can kind of see the underside of the paper there. And the artist is actually mimicking a centuries-old Korean paper technique called junchi. So on the right here, we have an example of traditional junchi, and then on the left here is an artwork by Harris where she's using this junchi technique. And the process of junchi is similar to wool felting and involves handmade mulberry paper that is combined with water, rubbed, squeezed, and agitated by hand, causing the fibers to tangle and adhere firmly to one another. The material becomes almost leather-like, getting stronger and tougher the longer that it is worked on. Carol Harris was introduced to junchi by Korean-American artist and educator Jeong Chung, who she studied with. And this is the process that she uses in many of her works. And I thought that it was really interesting that she is mimicking this in her work on paper, where it's not the same technique at all, but she's using this, the aesthetic look of it. And in her work, I also thought it was really interesting that she incorporates these dotted hashes that could allude to lines on a map, a course of travel. Because the title is Uncharted Territory, it makes you think that this is perhaps a map. But I also think that she's also connecting this to her textile work. It looks like stitching to me. So it's interesting that in this new medium, she's bringing in her existing work into this. So the next work we're talking about was also produced for the Signal Return on Press Prints for Nonprofits, and it's by Detroit born and raised artist Tylon Sawyer. Sawyer created this artwork in conjunction with the Allied Media Project, which creates and cultivates media for liberation. Their vision is to care for ourselves, each other species, and the planet, and to dismantle the supremacist systems as they operate upon and within us. To assume responsibility for creating new, liberating ways of being and cultivating life for new joy. So any, like I said, any profits that came from the sale of these prints would go to that nonprofit that the artist has chosen. Tylon Sawyer's artworks focus on themes of individual and collective identity, race, history, and pop culture. Sawyer received a BFA from Eastern Michigan University and an MFA from the New York Academy of Art. That's Sawyer on the right and one of his other artworks on the left. This work, White on White Stone Mountain, is a line of cut variation of a painting by the same name, also done by Moore, that he produced in 2019. The painting, which we'll see in just a moment, and this print depict figures tumbling and contorting in front of the monuments that are carved into Stone Mountain. So we'll see the monuments in a moment as well, but you can see there's 1, 2, 3 faces that are all astride horses. And then Sawyer has used these figures that are contorting and unable to find comfort in front of these monuments. And we'll see in a moment how those two connect. This is the painting that he based this print off of, and you can kind of see the imagery a little more clear there. These sort of faceless figures. So located outside of Atlanta, Georgia, Stone Mountain is a mountain that contains the largest bas relief carving in the world and depicts 3 Confederate leaders, President of the Confederacy, Jefferson Davis, Robert E. Lee, and Stonewall Jackson. The sculpture is 42 feet deep, 90 feet high, and 190 feet wide, and it lies 400 feet above the ground. You can see this is a close-up of the carving, and then this is the part that it's at. The concept began in 1915 and was completed in 1972. And today, Stone Mountain Park is actually the most visited tourist site in the state of Georgia. So Tylon Sawyer has used this and his other artworks to look at how people of color haven't had input regarding the way in which history has been presented. In 2017, there was a large push in the United States to remove Confederate monuments from public spaces, and this included Stone Mountain. There were people who wanted it to be destroyed. And although in this case, the removal never happened, Sawyer was really inspired by the situation. And he was struck by the duality of the carving as this amazing piece of art and a real feat in art, but then also, having to understand that it has this deeply racist commemoration that it is doing. So he was sort of struggling with appreciating it for its artistic merit, and then also, not. So this work, we have these men that are twisting, contorting, unable to find comfort in front of this. And Sawyer has related this to being Black in America and having to exist within an oppressive environment of where you can never find comfort. The next artwork we're looking at is a serigraph print by Tyree Guyton, which you may recognize the name. So Guyton was born in Detroit in 1955 and grew up on Heidelberg Street on the city's east side. After the 1967 race riots, where over 412 buildings in the city were burned, Guyton's neighborhood began to deteriorate. And he had actually just come from overseas from being in the Army, and he was just struck how his neighborhood looked like a war had gone on and how a bomb had gone off in his own neighborhood. So he took it as his mission to change that, to transform it. So what he did, he started to transform his childhood street on Heidelberg Street into an outdoor art project that you might know as the Heidelberg Project, which you see on the left here. And it was really his goal to use this project to be medicine for the community, to heal this community that had gone through so much, and to bring joy and light and art to it. So in addition to his outdoor installations, Guyton also practices studio work in a variety of mediums. This work is a print titled Straight and Narrow, and comes from a portrait series by Guyton titled Faces of God. The series features faces, like you see the one here, all different, but all sharing one common feature: their smiling mouth with their large teeth. And Guyton, the purpose behind this series was that Guyton says that inner man, he believes, is smiling no matter the circumstances of your life. And in this work, he's also added the addition of the word God onto the forehead, which I think when you consider the title Straight and Narrow, that perhaps he's presenting this as a person who is now trying to follow the straight and narrow, perhaps with God on their mind, sort of as their guiding light. And the last artwork that we're going to be discussing is by Detroit artist George Rogers, who actually passed away in 2002. Now, I don't have a photo of Rogers. He was one of those artists where, his photograph wasn't taken a lot. There's not really a lot of information about him out there. There is a YouTube clip, and we'll get to this in a moment, but he was the first Black clay modeler to be hired into the auto industry. He worked for Ford Motor Company. And there's a video on YouTube from, I think, the 70s that shows him. They did a little snip on him. And that was really the only thing that I could find that had his face on it. So Rogers was born in 1930 in Rutledge, Alabama, and served in the Korean War. After his service, he studied at the Cleveland Institute of Arts, and then to Cranbrook in 1959 and was there until 1960. He was the former chairman of the Common Grounds Art Council and co-founder of the Artist Collective Gallery, known as Gallery 7, which was he and local artist Charles McGee set up together. He exhibited alongside McGee, as well as many other artists. He also taught classes at McGee's school, imparting his information and what he knew on other artists. So like I said, he was hired by the Ford Motor Company as an artist in clay sculptor and did design as well. He was the first Black clay modeler to be hired into the automotive industry. And he worked on both the Ford Mustang II as well as other cars at Ford. He was also part of the Ford Development Plan, which consisted of 3 architectural scale models. He also did these scale models for the Renaissance Center, areas of downtown Detroit, and the Fairlane City in Dearborn. What's really, really interesting about Rogers, and it kind of blows my mind that there's not more information on him out there, because he actually developed his own printmaking technique known as sculpture graph, which he used to make this work. So in 1984, he actually received a federal grant to develop this new graphic method, and it involves Roger taking various materials, including plastic, paper, wood veneer, and using them as matrices or plates in printmaking. Instead of using like a woodblock print or a rubber print, he would use these pieces that are in these biomorphic shapes. He would ink them and then send them through the press. And the result are these sort of layered biomorphic forms that kind of look like collage, but are not collage, but the technique is very similar to that in that he's layering them. And the result is a hybrid relief style print that creates these very dynamic compositions. And this is something that he worked his whole life on doing. You can see in these other 2 examples of his work that he's using this sculptural method as well. And it kind of looks like collage. It also looks like it's similar to a screen print process, but it's not. And although there are many other artworks in the exhibition that I would have loved to talk about, this concludes my talk today. I hope this brought everyone a little more information about these artworks, and I hope that you can go down to the gallery and take a look at these in person and see what you think and make your own connections and things like that. So once again, I want to thank you for joining me. Is there anyone that has any questions before we conclude? No? Okay, I just want to remind you too that next month I will be talking about those imperial robes, and I hope to see you all there. Thank you. Thank you.